The people appeared ready to do anything John directed. Herod thought it best, therefore, to avoid future difficulties by putting him to death and preventing any problems he might cause later. Sparing the men might cause him to regret that he did so, only too late. Herod Antipas had been watching John carefully, looking for reason to arrest him. John provided the reasons by offending Herod's new wife, Herod's Nabatean wife. Herod Antipas married a Nabatean princess. The Nabateans were an ancient Arabic people. In the days of the apostles, they occupied the Negev, the territories of ancient Edom and Moab, and a large portion of northern Arabia. The powerful king of the Nabateans controlled critical trade routes from the Arabia to the Mediterranean. They made their capital in the canyon city of Petra. Today, Petra is a popular tourist destination in modern Jordan. King Herod the Great had Nabatean origins. His father was an Edomite convert to Judaism, and his mother came from the royal house of Nabatea. Despite the family connection, King Herod fought with the Nabateans for control of territories around the Dead Sea and in Transjordan, as the powerful next-door neighbor to Judea and Perea. The Aretas dynasty of Nabatea played an important role on the local political stage. King Aretas III vied with Herod the Great at the borders of their land. King Herod rebuilt the old Hasmonean fortress Machaerus on the east side of the Dead Sea, right on the border of Nabatean territory, in part to defend his kingdom from the neighbors. Near the end of King Herod's life, a new Nabatean king rose to power. King Aretas IV Philopatrus ruled the Nabatean kingdom from 9 BCE to 40 CE. Nabatean inscriptions refer to him as Aretas, king of the Nabateans, friend of his people. This was the same King Aretas who later took control over Damascus. A few years before his death, King Herod secured peace with his dangerous neighbor by arranging a marriage between his teenage son Herod Antipas and the daughter of King Aretas IV, a political savvy marriage. The Nabatean princess must have undergone a conversion to Judaism before marrying Antipas. The two of them lived together some 3 decades and might have lived happily ever after if Antipas had not made a certain business trip to Rome. Herod's brother's wife. Herod Antipas had a half-brother named Herod Philip. Antipas and Philip were both sons of Herod the Great, but by different mothers. Now the two brothers also had a long-dead older brother named Aristobulus by yet another mother. Aristobulus was the son of King Herod the Great and the Hasmonean princess Mariamne the first. Aristobulus had been the heir to both Herod's kingdom and the noble dynasty of Hasmonean kings and priests that ruled in Judea since the days of Judah Maccabee. King Herod sent Aristobulus to Rome to be raised and educated in the royal court of Emperor Augustus. Aristobulus once stood to inherit at least half of King Herod the Great's kingdom, but alas, King Herod came to suspect the young man of treason. Less than 12 months before Yeshua's birth, King Herod had his son Aristobulus strangled to death. Aristobulus left behind several children, including a son named Herod Agrippa and a daughter named Herodias. They lived the high aristocratic life in Rome. Eventually, Herodias married her uncle Herod Philip of Rome, and together they had a daughter named Salome. During the days of the master, Herod Antipas made a trip to Rome. He had some business to conduct with the government, so while staying in the great city, he lodged with his half-brother Herod Philip. There he met, perhaps for the first time, Herodias and her teenage daughter Salome. Although Herodias was his sister-in-law, the wife of his brother Herod Philip, and his niece, the daughter of his brother Aristobulus, Antipas fell in love with her. "Wouldn't you rather be married to a king?" he asked his sister-in-law. Of course, Antipas was not a king. He was only a tetrarch, but he fancied himself a king and expected to receive the title from Rome soon enough. He promised Herodias that if she would agree to divorce her husband and join him in the Galilee, he would take her as his wife. Herodias liked the idea of being called Queen Herodias. She agreed to the plan, but only on the condition that Antipas divorce his Nabatean wife first. Though polygamy was an option, Herodias had no interest In sharing Antipas finished his business in Rome and returned to his palace in Galilee to await the arrival of his new wife-to-be. Only one problem remained. He had to break the news to his wife. The Nabatean princess had been married to Herod Antipas for 3 decades. It did not take her long to figure out what was afoot. She discovered the plan by means of some court intrigue or informant. She immediately realized her danger in the Herodian families. When a family member became a threat or an obstacle, they did not live long. Antipas was not likely to divorce her and risk an international incident by offending King Aretas and the Nabateans. She anticipated that her husband might frame her for treason or adultery instead, or if feeling less creative, he might have her poisoned. She stayed calm and did not reveal that she knew about Herodias. Instead, feigning ill health, she told her husband that she planned on spending some time by the Dead Sea at the border fortress of Macarius, soaking in the palace spa. Fortress Macarius was an imposing Hasmonean-era fortress rebuilt and fortified by Herod the Great. Antipas installed an elaborate palace with royal accommodations. A vacation to Macarius and the Dead Sea seemed reasonable to Antipas. Never suspecting that his wife already knew his plans, Antipas agreed to let her make the trip. She made arrangements ahead and sent a secret message to Nabatea. When she arrived at Macarius, the general of the Nabatean army awaited her. He escorted her into Nabatean territory, and the military brought her home to her father in Petra. That was not how Antipas had hoped things would work out, but he announced a divorce and married Herodias all the same. His new bride brought her teenage daughter Salome along with her, a forbidden union. For Yochanan said to Herodias, "The wife of your brother is not permitted for you." Marcos chapter 6, verse 18. John the Immerser declared the marriage invalid by Torah. It is not lawful for you to have your brother's wife. Mark chapter 6, verse 18. He announced to Antipas, Josephus agrees with John's assessment of the union between Herod and Herodias. As a commentary on the morality of the situation, he wrote, Herodias took it upon herself to violate the laws of our country. She divorced herself from her husband while he was alive, and she married Herod Antipas, her husband's brother by the father's side. Josephus states that the marriage violated Torah because, number one, she divorced herself from her husband while he was alive, and two, she married her husband's brother. The Torah does not grant women the authority to divorce their husbands. In those days, a Jewish woman with a legitimate cause could obtain a divorce from her husband only by requesting the elders of the community to force the husband to divorce her. As a Roman citizen, however, Herodias could obtain a divorce through a Roman court of law. Circumventing the Jewish courts to get all together, she obtained a civil divorce and left her husband. The Torah does not allow a man to marry his sister-in-law if his brother is still alive. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your brother's wife. It is your brother's nakedness. Leviticus chapter 18, verse 16. If there is a man who takes his brother's wife, it is abhorrent. He has uncovered his brother's nakedness. They will be childless. Leviticus chapter 20, verse 21. A woman may marry her husband's brother only if her husband has died. But so long as her husband remains alive, even if she is divorced from him, she may not marry her husband's brother. Josephus may have simply been echoing John the Immerser's condemnation of the marriage. John the Immerser rebuked Herod Antipas. It is not lawful for you to have her. He did not hesitate to publicly denounce the marriage either. Divorce for the sake of remarriage. Rabbi Yeshua added his voice to the protest with a startling interpretation of the Torah's laws of divorce. Yeshua told his disciples, whoever divorces his wife and marries another woman commits adultery against her, and if she herself divorces her husband and marries another man, she has committed adultery. Mark chapter 10, verses 11 through 12. This saying also appears in Matthew chapter 5, verse 32, Matthew chapter 19, verse 9, and Luke chapter 16, verse 18. But only in Mark's gospel does it allow for the possibility of women divorcing her husband. Rabbi Yeshua's radical interpretation on the laws of divorce seemed to imply that anyone divorced for any reason other than marital infidelity your husband having sexual, sex outside of the marriage, or your wife having sex outside the marriage is permissible, commits adultery if he or she remarries. Brad Young points out a possible alternative rendering the Master's words regarding remarriage and adultery. Whoever divorces his wife and marries another woman commits adultery against her. Young notes that the Hebrew vav conjunction, the word and, might imply a cause and effect relationship between the two phrases. If so, anyone who divorces his wife in order to marry another commits adultery. Whoever divorces his wife in order to marry another woman commits adultery against her, and if she herself divorces her husband in order to marry another man, she has committed adultery. Mark chapter 10, verses 11 through 12. In other words, Rabbi Yeshua considered a divorce issued for the sake of remarriage as invalid. See, that's what it means, for the sake of being remarried. Not those that have been divorced for a while and have gone away from being abused or sexually, you know what I mean. Young's reconstruction fits a criticism of the marriage between Antipas and Herodias astonishingly well. Both Antipas and Herodias divorced their spouses in order to marry one another. Again, in Jewish law, a woman did not have the option of divorcing her husband. Herodias circumvented Jewish law and obtained a civil divorce by Roman law. Is it possible that the Master's condemnation of that marriage has been misapplied as a standard pertaining to all divorces? Female Fatalia. For Yochanan said to Herodias, the wife of your brother is not permitted for you, and Herodias held a grudge against him and sought a way to put him to death. But she had not found one. Marcos chapter 6, verses 18 through 19. John the Immerser condemned the scandalous marriage, and he declared the union forbidden by Torah law. He did not stop there. He publicly reprimanded him because of Herodias, his brother's wife, and because of all the wicked things which Herod had done. Luke chapter 3, verse 19. Herod Antipas found the popular preacher's stinging rebukes irksome. His new wife found the long-haired madman intolerable. Remember, he was a Nazarite. When Herodias heard what John was saying about her and her marriage, she only wanted to see John dead. John's condemnation of her marriage branded her an adulteress. Aside from her personal embarrassment over the situation, John's rebuke devastated her dreams of being a queen. She wanted her husband elevated to the station of king over Galilee, Perea, and perhaps even Judea. She hoped he would be the next King Herod, and that she would be the mother of a new line of kings over Israel. Like her Hasmonean forebears, John devastated her plans to restore her noble family name. Thanks to John's defamation, the Jewish people would now regard any heir she bore for the throne as a mamzer, illegitimate. He ruined her public image and destroyed her aspirations to be a queen, spawning a dynasty of Jewish kings. She demanded his arrest and execution. Safe and Mercurius. Herodas, the tetrarch of the district, who had been rebuked by him over the matter of his brother Philippus' wife, Herodia, and over all the evil that Herodas had done, added this on top of it all. He shut up Yochanan in prison. Lucas chapter 3, verses 19 through 20. Antipas already sought a pretense on which to arrest the popular prophet. John's public denouncements provided the pretense. He complied with his bride's wishes up to a point. Luke says sardonically that he added to all the wicked things he had already done by locking John in prison. According to Josephus, Antipas brought John in chains to Fortress Mercurius by the Dead Sea, the same fortress to which his previous wife had fled.